Hello, today we're going to be talking about Chapter 4, Youth Sports. Go ahead and get your slide open up to the first one with the referees and the young girls. Essentially, youth sports came about when adults started to realize that the developmental process of children were really influenced by the experience and the environments that they're exposed to. Go ahead to the next slide. So here are some origins of organized youth sports. Emerged in the 20th century, really focused just on boys' participation. A lot after World War II, programs to emphasize competition, and then I'm sure this isn't surprising, but girls' interests were generally ignored. Go ahead to the next slide. So changing ideas about families in the late 20th century. So understand that how the family works now and the dynamics are quite different over the last 4 decades. There's just more of an emphasis on private and putting money into those things and really kind of ignoring the public avenues for sports. Go ahead to the next slide. So the social changes related to the growth of organized youth sports. So understand, over the decades, things have changed. Now you're seeing more. Both parents are working outside the home, not just the dad. Moms are having a lot more career-driven, lifestyles. There's a new definition of what it means to be a good parent. Controlling your child 24 hours a day. This idea of helicopter parenting and really being on top of everything. There's this growing belief that informal activity, essentially like free play, just going out in the neighborhood, can lead to trouble. The world's a more dangerous place, or the perception at least is there that it's a dangerous place, that you can't just let your kids go out and do whatever they want because something bad could happen to them. There's increased visibility of high performance and professional sports in our society. So essentially what they're saying is that we can just see all the professional sports and get access to it so much more, so it's in our faces constantly. The culture of childhood play has essentially nearly disappeared. I'm a mom, and so now you have the big buzzword of like play dates. You like organize a day where your children get together with some other children and play, where I'm sure some of you, and specifically myself, my parents didn't organize that stuff. It was, go figure it out, go outside and play with your neighbors and do what you want to do. So it's a lot different than it used to be. Go ahead to the next slide. So here's a picture of just, some kids who are obviously in some type of, karate competition, and this slide says, good parents. And essentially, the symbols that are out there now is if your child is successful in youth sports, then you're being a good parent. Go ahead to the next slide. This is just a funny picture, and it's in your book too. I think it's hilarious because it's clearly kind of an older picture, but the success of children today is really viewed as how the parents are doing, and if the child isn't successful, then the parent is failing. Go on to the next slide. So here are some major trends in youth sports, and this is really important that you get this slide here, so I'll go through it slowly. Organized programs have become increasingly privatized. So youth sports, there's all these private programs now which cost a lot of money to be a part of, and there's so many of them now, whether it's volleyball, basketball, soccer, football, track. They've just only grown. When I was growing up, that wasn't very popular. Sure, we had organized private activities. I played private soccer, but majority of people participated in the public things, the things that were reasonably priced and were pretty much given access to all individuals. Organized programs increase emphasis on performance ethics. So just that idea of winning and being the best, and not so much even about like learning and cooperation, but just how can you, be the best at what you're doing. An increase in private elite training facilities. So you're seeing so many kids now get, trainers at a young age and individual lessons. I mean, even at work, we get contacted by parents. My child would like an individual lesson. They're 11 years old and they want them to work privately with a coach, all by themselves. So there's a real increase of getting that kind of extra edge that, again, some of us, including myself, who, I'm a little bit older than all of you, really didn't have access to. Increase in parent involvement and concern. Parents are spending a lot of money on this stuff, and so they are involved. They want to know that their investment is paying off. They don't want to pay all this money, for example, for an individual lesson if their child is not going to get better at soccer or whatever sports they are. So they're really on top of everything, and they want to, make sure that they are involved in every way possible. And increased participation in alternative and action sports. So due to all this control on youth sports, you're starting to see youth now really start to participate in alternative and action sports where adults don't have as much control. Go ahead to the next slide. So the types of youth sports, the youth sports types of sponsors. So there's public tax-supported community recreational programs. So there's programs within all communities that are supported by the tax dollars that make it very reasonable, if not free, to participate in activities. There's public interest nonprofit community organizations. So those are organizations that are still for the public. They're not trying to make money. They are nonprofit, but they may charge a fee just to make sure they can run the program. There's private interest nonprofit sport organizations. So there's private groups that are looking for something a little bit different than just the general public, but again, they're not trying to make money, nonprofit. But then there's the private commercial clubs where those are the ones that are trying to make money and are charging a significant amount to participate. The goal and the purpose of youth sports may vary depending on the sponsorship. So essentially, it depends on what kind of money they're getting. That will go back to what we've talked about before. What kind of equipment, what kind of access to facilities, what kind of coaching are they getting? This can all play a factor. Go ahead to the next slide. So the privatization of youth sports. So, and some of you might have, played in privates, on private teams. Like I said earlier, I did. I played on a private basketball and soccer team growing up. Privatization occurs when public programs are cut, which is happening. Most common in middle to upper income areas, often reduce economic and ethnic equality. So it really shuts out a big part of society because it's expensive to participate in these private activities. Private programs are not accountable in the same way as public programs are. So, they don't have to follow, as it says on the slide here, like gender equality. So if it's private, they don't have to follow the same rules that are placed on all the public facilities. And we'll get more into the gender stuff when we're into the gender chapter. So go ahead to the next slide. So private commercial programs emphasis winning and success, and public programs, really emphasize inclusion and fun. And that's the real big difference there. Is one, it goes back to what we talked about earlier when we were talking about performance sports, power and performance sports over the kind of participation aspect. That's very similar to this. Go ahead to the next slide. So cost and participation in these private things are incredibly expensive, as points out here, $4,000 a year for families on club travel teams. I haven't worked with a club team in a long time. When I lived in Ohio and I was coaching out there, I just helped with tryouts for the Columbus Crew Academy. They're obviously, if you don't know, they're associated with the MLS team. They have boys and girls club teams. And at that time, which would have been like in 2008 and 9 when I was helping with tryouts, the price to be on the team was $5,000. And that didn't even include some tournament pricing and some other things that would have came additionally to it. $5,000. And that was almost 10 years ago. So I can only imagine what the cost of that is now. And so when you start to think about those things, no matter how hard you work or how good you are, you may not be able to participate in these things if you don't have the funds. Go ahead to the next slide. So performance ethic, which we've already heard a little bit, but it's a set of ideas and beliefs emphasizing that the quality of sport experience can be measured in terms of improvement skills, especially related to skills of others. So let's break that down a little bit. Set of ideas and belief emphasizing that the quality of the sport experience, so like how much you're enjoying the sport experience, really is measured by the improvement of skills and how it relates to others. So fun is equal to becoming better. So you're having fun if you're getting better. Common in private programs, tied to parents' notions of investing in their child's future. So you're having a good time if you're getting better. My money's going a long way if you're getting better. I don't really care if you're enjoying the sport. I'm more concerned is if you're getting better. So I hope you understand that. Go on to the next slide. Elite sport training programs, so they're private, expensive, they emphasize rewards through the sport. Children often work long hours and, are laborers. You're going to, when you're talking about, elite sports training programs, we're talking like the big dogs that, even are putting in, 3 to 4, hours a day training. Some programs raise ethical issues about child and adult relationships as well, which you'll see in, some of the slides and videos that I have posted. Go ahead to the next slide. Increased parental involvement and concern. So the culture today in the United States, children are seen as products of parenting and creations of the parents. Child success is visible and valued and, really kind of reaffirms how the parents are doing. Parents now take youth sports very seriously. And, I see this all the time. We will have youth parents contact us and say, hey, my U11 team is not winning and it's been awful. I need to get them to win. And as a college coach, we're still thinking more about like developing them. They're 11 years old. I hope you're teaching them, and you shouldn't really be concerned if they're winning or losing at this point. You should be concerned with them having fun and enjoying the sport and getting better at it. Go ahead to the next slide. Increased interest in alternative sports. I'm just going to briefly touch on this. Again, due to all the structure activities that are adult controlled, you're just seeing an increased amount of individuals participate in alternative sports where they can be more free. So, for example, like skateboarding. You can go to a skateboarding park and, there's not a lot of rules or regulations and things like that you have to follow. So you're seeing more children participate in those types of events. Go ahead to the next slide. Developmental issues in children's sports. So again, this is an important slide, important part of your book to read through. So informal sports such as pickup games have declined to really the point of extinction. So kids just going out and, playing a pickup game really doesn't happen. It's interesting because even I found at the collegiate level, on my own soccer team, that it's sometimes difficult for them to go and organize these kind of things. And it kind of makes me start to think about, have they ever been asked to organize these things? Had they ever done it on their own where they just had to, put teams together and rules and all of that? And I think that's happening less and less. Nearly all sport experience for children now occur in organized adult-controlled programs. So there's always an adult there making sure that the kids are in line, and there's no real free decision-making by the youth. Research on the implication of this change is rare. So there's not a lot of research done because, parents don't want their children to be studied. Parents don't want that to happen. And there's a lot of rules and regulations in regards to studying children. So there's just not a lot of research out there. Go ahead to the next slide. So this slide here is going to show you the player-controlled and adult-controlled sports and the differences between them. And I'm not going to go through all of this, but I mean it's pretty self-explanatory that adult-controlled sports are going to have way more guidelines and winning and all of that business that we've talked about, formal rules. Where player-controlled sports are going to be more about connections and hanging out with each other and learning and having fun and problem solving and just reaffirming friendships. Go ahead to the next slide. So developmental issues. To understand one's position in a complex team sport. So what they're saying is, like, let's take basketball. In order for an individual to understand their role as like the point guard, okay, they must be able to do these 3 things. Mentally visualize the ever-changing location of their teammates and opponents on the entire field. So if I'm the point guard of the basketball team, I got to be able to envision and know where people are going at all times. Access to spatial relationships between all players relative to the ball. So you know where other players should be where in relationship to the ball. Third, the information, synthesizing this information to determine where they should be in relation to the ball. When adults ignore this learning pattern, that understanding where they need to be and where other people need to be in relation to the ball, players are more likely to drop out and not play anymore when they don't learn this. And that's where you see, kids get really excited about a sport till about 11 or 12, and then they stop doing it because this developmental thing did not occur. Go ahead to the next slide. Really important slide here, which I think is interesting. Children under the age of 8 are not ready to play complex team sports. So they are not ready to go out and play a 5v5 soccer game. It's been proven. It's the studies. I mean, there's, and it's interesting because I've gotten into conversations with soccer coaches about this. I mean, this is out of our realm. This is what psychologists and sociologists and everything have studied. That they're not capable of doing it. Games can be increasingly organized for individuals 8 through 14 years old, but positional play should not be emphasized. So you should not be emphasizing you're a forward, you're a midfielder, you're a defender, you're a center, you're a setter. You should really be organizing them, but letting them to kind of, test the waters, try some different things, and learn where everybody needs to be. No travel team should no more than one game a week, and no more than 35 games per year in a single sport. It's unbelievable. For children, 8 through 14. That's not happening. There's so many more games than that occurring. And I guess my experience is with baseball and softball soccer, and that is not happening. Excellence is not developed among children who don't claim personal ownership of their own sport participation. So when a child isn't choosing to do it and really taking ownership of it, they're not going to fully develop in that sport. Involvement in informal games and sports is critical to develop excellence over a long run. So, having some of those informal activities is what's going to help them maintain what they, the sport, and continue to love doing it. Go ahead to the next slide. When are children ready to play organized and competitive sports? Prior to the age of 12, many children don't have the ability to fully understand competitive team sports. So they play beehive soccer. And if you don't know what beehive soccer is, if you've never been around soccer, it's essentially it's when they're trying to score a goal and you just see this clump of little kids running around. It's adorable. It really is. It's so cute. All these little kids running around trying to score. That's beehive soccer. There's no spreading out. They don't understand that they shove people forward and back and all of that. Team sports require the use of a third-party perspective. So until you can see the world through the eyes of others, you can't understand competitive team sports. Learning the dynamic cooperation is a prerequisite to fully understanding competitive relationships. Essentially, children who don't learn this dynamic won't understand the ethics in sports and may become difficult to coach. Go ahead to the next slide. Till children learn about the dynamics of cooperation, they cannot understand the team dynamics of competitive sports. So, again, there's a development thing that goes beyond sports here, that there's like really a hierarchy of how they do things, and they can't move on to one area of competitive sports if they haven't developed in another. 11-year-olds on competitive teams play too many games. They don't have enough opportunities to improve their skills and really develop a playing style, which I completely agree with. Go ahead to the next slide. So here's a report card for the U.S. youth sports. As you can see, child center psychology, we get a D, coaching a C, health and safety a C+, officiating a B-. I always joke how is the officiating the one that gets the highest score, but parental behavior and involvement is a D. So overall, we are not doing very good with our youth sports whatsoever. Go ahead to the next slide. So summary of the report. Youth sports today have lost the child center focus, or we're not really worried about the child so much. We're worried about something else. Been distorted by overinvested parents, failed to train and evaluate coaches. I mean, that's a huge one. Who's training our coaches, and how are they being trained to train these youth? I've taken several courses for coaching soccer. I've never taken any youth ones, but I'd be really interested in knowing if they teach this kind of stuff to their youth coaches. Mistakenly emphasize early sports specialization. So again, telling kids at like 12, you're a really good soccer player, you should stop playing basketball and volleyball and you should start specializing just in soccer. And that happens a lot. And it's not just soccer, it's in all sports. And they just ignore the development abilities of children. They just do. They see people who are really successful at a young age, and they're like, wow, that person, is unbelievable, and she's 14 years old, and so I want my kid to be that way, and she's 11, so we're going to start these programs, and that's difficult. So organized youth sports are a luxury item actually in most countries. We take it for granted here that we have access to youth sports, and we just think that everybody has that. But in almost every other country, it's a luxury item to be able to play actual organized sports. Most countries just play pickup games and organize their own things within their communities that really have no real guidance or direction. They just do it for the fun of it. Go to the next slide. So here's just a funny, photo or a cartoon, family dynamics, the irony of parental commitment to youth sports. I mean, just kind of saying like, hey, we give up everything for our youth sports. Go to the next slide. Family dynamics and issues, youth sports and youth sport participation required family resources and volunteer labor of parents. So like essentially what's happening now is you need to bring treats, or you need to volunteer and take tickets or work the concession stands. They're more, the next kind of point here discusses how parents are more morally obligated to nurture sports dreams of their children. So these parents, their mind are like, well, if my little girl wants to play softball in college, then I need to do whatever I can to make sure she gets there. So it's my duty, regardless of the price or the time, to make sure she gets access to those things. Parent labor in youth sports often reproduces gender ideas about work and family. So which parent is actually super involved, and what role are they playing? Is dad bringing the snacks and working the concession stands, or is dad doing the coaching and things like that? So go ahead to the next slide. Recommendations for changing youth sports. Now, for some of you, you might be thinking about, somehow being involved in youth sports, whether you're going to be a teacher someday, maybe you plan to coach someday, and here are some recommendations that they're making. Make play spaces more safe and accessible to children as possible. Provide indirect guidance without being controlling, and then treat these sports as worthwhile sites for facing challenges and developing competence. Go on to the next slide. Recommendations for changing youth sports, changing the organization of youth sports, Increase action and personal involvement, facilitate exciting challenges, encourage forms of personal expression, and facilitate friendship formation and reaffirmation. Go ahead to the next slide. Recommendations for changing high-level performance sports. Establish policies and procedures and rules to really make sure that the children's interests are still there. Make sure they're not overdoing it, as we went, a couple slides ago. Like, how many games are we playing a year, and how many should we play, and how many hours should they be practicing every single week, and things like that, and who's coaching them, and what are they coaching them. Create less controlling environments to design to promote growth, development, and empowerment. Go ahead to the next slide. So obstacles to the change, okay? This is not going to be surprising. Too many adults who control youth sports give priority to control organization and performance ethic and ignore age-based development concerns. So the people that are in control are adults, and they don't really care what the research has shown. Coaching education programs that don't deal with social and development issues. Again, it would be interesting to know what the youth programs do here to develop their youth, or their coaches. Go ahead to the next slide. Coaching education programs are useful when they teach coaches to deal with children's safety and responsibility, organize practices and teach skills. Are a problem if they foster, this idea of how to control the children and make it really sports specific. If it's just teaching you how to teach soccer to 12-year-olds and doesn't discuss, well, here's the developmental that you need to take into account, then it's really not being helpful. Go on to the next slide. So that's the end of this lecture here. I do have some videos that I think you're going to find really interesting related to youth sports. So make sure that you take the time to watch them. I think going through these PowerPoints and this lecture is going to be beneficial now that you can go back and watch them. Thank you.